Hey, thank you, sweet, for coming through. Thank you. I will wait for some more people to come through and then we shall start the last chapters of Judges. Start the next chapters of Judges. So I'll just wait a little bit more. I will do a recap of what we did on Thursday. We read the last judge, which was Samson, and we read chapters 13 to 16. That's what we will that's what we will recap on before we get into the next lot of chapters, what the end of Judges. Hey sweet, thank you for coming through. Thank you. I'll just give a quick introduction. Those that are new here, I really just get into the word, get into the Bible, and I really just encourage those to build a relationship with God and get to know God. And that's ultimately what I do. I like to plant little seeds and, just show how much from my testimony God has changed my life, right? And transformed me. So, this is my season of learning, and I am just taking this time to really learn, really just hear God's wisdom and His knowledge that is given to me. Hey, Kevin, thanks for coming through. His knowledge that's given to me, and to ultimately build my foundation with God strong this year, right? Very strong, and hopefully bring people to the kingdom with me. So that is why I do this. That is the main reason why. So we read Samson on Thursday, and that was the last judge. We're in the book of Judges, and we're at the end of Judges now. So Samson was the last judge, right? And the themes that I stuck with was pride and self-righteousness, right? And Samson was his own downfall, right? He didn't take God seriously. He didn't cherish the gifts that God gave him enough to keep sacred and secret to himself, right? And he started to rely on himself rather than relying on God, right? So, Samson in the end was his own worst enemy, right? Just like how sometimes we can be our own worst enemy, we can, sabotage ourselves, right? It's the same way that Samson did, right? But towards the end, we can see that he started to build a little bit of faith and called on God for help, right? But was he calling on God to help the Israelites, or was he calling on God for his own selfish reasons, right? That's up to you guys to figure out when you're reading Judges, right? So, as we go into the next chapters, which is chapters 17 to 21, I just want to do a quick introduction, right? Because, now we get to see the magnitude of how evil the Israelites have become, how they have left God and decided to do things on their own terms, right? So, these chapters will show how out of control the nation was and how evil they became, right? And how they did things as they saw right, taking justice into their own hands and judgment, apostasy is used a lot in the ESV, right? And that's an act of rebelling against, forsaking, abandoning, or falling away from the one that from what one has believed, right? And that's kind of the times we're living in right now. So the rebellion, turning away from God and living how we see fit in our own eyes, right? And in these chapters, these evil acts show why God in the beginning had to cleanse the world of evil, right? Why he had to purify earth and mankind, because it was corrupt then, but in these next chapters it's more corrupt than it was in Genesis. So it's kind of like a repeat of history from Genesis to Judges, right? And again, it's a repeat of history from biblical times to now, right? How people are straying away from God and doing as they please, right? As they say, what a wicked generation. Thank you, divinely, thank you. In the end, right, the Israelites just became like the Canaanites, which God was trying to avoid, yeah? And even though God raised up judges to deliver Israel out of oppression, some of them judges themselves became part of the problem, right? They became a little bit like the Israelites, a little bit rebellious, a little bit arrogant, a little bit self-righteous, and leading the Israelites further more into destruction. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an outlook on what we're going to be reading, maybe like a little bit of a disclaimer, because we just get to see the depths of evil the Israelites had become without God's guidance. So we're in Judges and we're in the last chapters 17 to 21. Now, chapter 17. Now a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim said to his mother, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and about which I heard you utter a curse, I have that silver with me. I took it. Then his mother said, the Lord bless you, my son. When he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother, he said, I solemnly consecrate my silver to the Lord for my son to make an image overlaid with silver. I will give it back to you. So after he returned the silver to his mother, he took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to a silversmith who used them to make the idol, and it was put in Micah's house. Now this man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and some household gods and installed one of his sons as priest. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. A young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, who had been living within the clan of Judah, left that town in search of some other place to stay. On his way, he came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. Micah asked him, where are you from? I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, he said, and I am looking for a place to stay. Then Micah said to him, live with me and be my father and priest, and I will give you 10 shekels of silver a year, your clothes, and your food. So the Levite agreed to live with him, and the young man became one of his sons to him. Then Micah installed the Levite and the young man because his priest and lived in his house. And Micah said, now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since this Levite has become my priest. Chapter 18. Thank you, Kevin. In those days, Israel had no king. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking a place of their own where they might settle, because they had not yet come into an inheritance among the tribe of Israel. So the Danites sent 5 of their leading men from Zohar and Eshtaol to spy out the land and explore it. These men represented all the Danites. They told them, go explore the land. So they entered the hill of the country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah, where they spent the night. When they were near Micah's house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. So they turned in there and asked him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? Why are you here?" He told them what Micah had done for him and said, "He has hired me and I am his priest." Then they said to him, "Please inquire of God to learn whether our journey will be successful." The priest answered them, "Go in peace. Your journey has the Lord's approval." So the 5 men left and came to Laish, where they saw that the people were living in safety, like the Sidonians, at peace and secure. And since they lacked nothing, they were prosperous. Also, they lived a long way from the Sidonians and had no relationship with anyone else. When they returned to Zorah and Eshtaol, their fellow Danites asked them, "How did you find things?" They answered, "Come on, let's attack them. We have seen the land and it is very good. Aren't you going to do something? Don't hesitate to go there and take it over. When you get there, you will find an unexpected people and a spacious land that God has put in your hands, a land that lacks nothing whatever." Then 600 men of the Danites, armed for battle, set out from Zorah and Eshtaol. On their way, they set up camp near Kiriath Jearim in Judah. This is why the place west of Kiriath Jearim is called Manaha. Dan. To this day, from there they went on to the hill country of Ephraim and came to Micah's house. Then the 5 men who had spied out the land of Laish said to their fellow Danites, "Do you know that one of these houses has an ephod, some household gods, and an image overlaid with silver? Now you know what to do." So they turned in there and went into the house of the young Levi at Micah's place and greeted him. The 600 Danites, all for battle, stood at the entrance of the gate. The 5 men who had spied out the land went inside and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, while the priests and the 600 armed men stood at the entrance of the gate. When the 5 men went into Micah's house and took the idol, the ephod, and the household goods, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" They answered him, "Be quiet, don't say a word. Come with us and be our father and priest. Isn't it better that you serve a tribe and clan in Israel as priests rather than one man's household?" Hey, twins. Hey, Nick. So you see now that the Levite, right, has already sinned by being a priest to one man, right? He's already sinned. Now he's going to be a priest to a clan, a whole nation, right? Again, they're sinning against God, which is really showing the depth of the evil. Even a Levite is entertaining the Danites, right? The priest was very pleased. He took the ephod, the household gods, and the idols and went along with the people, putting their little children, their livestock, and their possessions in front of them. They turned away and left. When they had gone some distance from Micah's house, the men who lived near Micah were called together and overtook the Danites. As they shouted after them, the Danites turned and said to Micah, "What's the matter with you that you called out your men to fight?" He replied, "You took the gods I made and my priests and went away. What else do I have? How can you ask, what's the matter with you?" The Danites answers, "Don't argue with us, or some of the men may get angry and attack you, and you and your family will lose your lives." So the Danites went their way, and Micah, seeing that they were too strong for him, turned around and went back. When When they took what Micah had made and his priests and went on to Laish against a people at peace and secure, they attacked them with the sword and burned down their city. There was no one to rescue them because they lived a long way from Sidon and didn't and did and had no relationship with anyone else. The city was in the valley near Beth Rahab. The Danites rebuilt the city and settled there. They named it Dan after their ancestor Dan, who was born to Israel through the city used to be called Laish. There, the Danites set up for themselves the idol, and Jonathan, son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests for the tribe of Dan until the time of captivity of the land. So I just wanted to the contrast here in Jonathan, right, the son of Moses, disobeying God, and then the contrast of, you know, Moses was an upright man, a blameless man, right? He was obedient to God up until he wasn't, right? The contrast that how Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt and obeyed God and did what God said, and, you know, was at the was pleading on Israelites' mercy when they were doing wrong, right? In contrast now to Jonathan, the son of Moses, actually acting in this sin is such a big difference, right? And it kind of tells the state that Israel is in. It tells the state of the depth of disobedience and evil Israel has got, and how they have completely turned their backs on God, right? They continue to use the idol Micah had made all the time the house of God was in Shiloh. So, you know, the Levite originally was with Micah, and then, you know, the Danite said, well, we can give you more, we can give you this, we can give you that. And he was so persuaded by what more that the Danites could give, right? He went to that side. But, you know, there's no price on the treasures that God gives you, right? There's no price on the gifts he gives you, right? So no amount of money, no amount of bribe or nothing can give you what God can give you. So, you know, that Levite placed his trust in man, right? He put his trust in this idol, silver, money, right? That was his God, right? And it really shouldn't have been. He should have been dedicated, which the Levites should have been, right? Because remember, God said the Levites are dedicated to him. The Levites should have been dedicated to God, right? And trying to steer the Danites in the right way, to God's way, but instead he followed their way, which is quite tragic, really. Chapter 19. In those days, Israel had no king. Now a Levite who lived in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. But she was unfaithful to him. She left him and went back to her parents' home in Bethlehem. Judah, after she had been there for 4 months, her husband went to her to persuade her to return. He had with him his servant and 2 donkeys who took him into their parents' home. And when her father saw him, he gladly welcomed him. His father-in-law, the woman's father, prevailed on him to stay, so he remained with him 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. On the 4th day they got up early, and he prepared to leave. But the woman's father said to his son-in-law, refresh yourself with something to eat, then you can go. So the 2 of them sat down to eat and drink together. Afterwards, the woman's father said, please stay tonight and enjoy yourself. And when the men got up to go, his father-in-law persuaded him, so he stayed there at night. On the morning of the 5th day, when he rose to go, the woman's father said, refresh yourself, wait till noon. So the 2 of them ate together. Then when the man with his concubine and his servant got up to leave, his father-in-law, the woman's father, said, now look, it's almost evening, spend the night here. The day is nearly over, stay and enjoy yourself. Early tomorrow morning you can get up and be on your way. But unwillingly to stay another night, the man left and went towards Jebus, that is Jerusalem, with his 2 saddled donkeys on and his concubine. When they were near Jebus, and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, "Come, let's stop at this city of the Jebusites and spend the night." His master replied, "No, we won't go into any city whose people are not Israelites. We will go on to Geba." He added, "Come, let's try to reach Geba or Ramah and spend the night at one of those places." So they went on, and the sun set as they neared Geba in Benjamin. There they stopped to spend the night. They went and sat in the city square, but no one took them in for the night. Then that evening, an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Geba, the inhabitants of the place where the Benjamites came in from his work in the fields. When he looked and saw the travelers in the city, the old man asked, "Where are you going? Where did you come from?" He answered, "We're on our way from Bethlehem in Judah to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim where I live. I have been to Bethlehem in Judah, and now I am going to the house of the Lord. No one has taken me in for the night. We have both straws and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for ourselves. Your servants, me, the woman, and the young man with us. We don't need anything." "You are welcome at my house," the old man said. "Let me supply whatever you need. Only don't spend the night in the square." So he took him in his house and fed his donkeys. After they had washed their feet, they had something to eat and drink. While they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house, pounding on the door. They shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him." The owner of the house went outside and said to him, "No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this outrageous thing. Look here. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you, and you can use them and do whatever you wish. But as for this man, don't do such an outrageous thing." But the men will not listen to him. So the men took his concubine and sent her outside to him, and they raped her and abused her throughout the night, and at dawn they let her go. At daybreak, the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there until daylight. When her master got up in the morning and opened the door of the house and stepped out to continue on his way, there lay his concubine, fallen in the doorway of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. Then a man put her on his donkey and set out for home. So, hey, sweet. Chapter 19. So I just want so this is not Islam, but okay. So I just want to point out, right, when I was reading this, no, Kevin, it's definitely a rough one. Honestly, I sat when I first read it, right, I was like really wrestling with like reading it. Like I was really wrestling to understand, right? But you know, I went back to Genesis in the times of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And because when I was reading it, I said, "What does this sound like? What does this sound like?" And I said, "Sodom and Gomorrah." It sounds like Sodom and Gomorrah, where this happened in that time, but they managed to be set free, right? They managed to escape that first initial conflict with the wicked men, right? But this time they didn't manage to escape, you know, the wickedness of what happened to the concubine, which shows me that these times are more evil than the time of Sodom and Gomorrah. Hi Joski, thank you for coming through. It shows the depths of evil it had gotten. And what did God do to Sodom and Gomorrah? Did he not destroy it? Did he not rain acid down on the towns, so on the city, so that it could be destroyed, because it was just so evil, right? That he had to purify um mankind again, right? um so it's definitely a rough one, because it also shows the moral conduct in that time. It shows sexual immorality in that time, right? And it's showing how bad it got. And every time we get to a chapter, it makes a point in highlighting, in those days Israel had no king. Everybody did as they saw fit, right? So God wasn't with them, right? um Everybody was doing everything on their own, right? And again, it's just to highlight how corrupt um it had become since that time of Sodom and Gomorrah. When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine limb by limb into 12 parts and sent them into all the areas of Israel. Everyone who saw it was saying to one another, "Such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came out of Egypt. Just imagine, we must do something, so speak up." Chapter 20. Then all the Israelites from Dan to Beersheba and from the land of Gilead came together as one and assembled before the Lord in Mizpah. The leaders of all the people of the tribes of Israel took their place in the assembly of God's people, 400,000 men armed with swords. The Benjamites heard that the Israelites had gone up to Mizpah. Then the Israelites said, "Tell us how this awful thing happened." So the Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, said, "I and my concubine came to Geba in Benjamin to spend the night. During the night, the men of Geba came after me and surrounded the house, intending to kill me. They raped my concubine and she died. I took my concubine, cut her up into pieces, and sent one piece to each region of Israel in Israel's inheritance, because they committed this lewd and outrageous act in Israel. Now all you Israelites, speak up and tell me what you have decided to do." All the men rose up together as one, saying, "None of us will go home, not one of us will remain to his house. But now this is what we'll do to Geba. We'll go up against it in order decided by casting lots. We will take 10 men out of every 100 from all the tribes of Israel, and 100 men from a household, and 1,000 from 10,000, to get provisions for the army. Then when the army arrives at Geba in Benjamin, it can give them what they deserve for this outrageous act done in Israel." So all the Israelites got together and united as one against the city. The tribes of Israel sent messages throughout the tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What about this awful crime that has been committed among you? Now turn those wicked men of Geba over to us, that we may put them to death and purge the evil from Israel." But the Benjamites would not listen to their fellow Israelites from their towns. They came together at Geba to fight against the Israelites. At once, the Benjamites mobilized 26,000 swordsmen from their town, in addition to 7,000 able young men from those living in Geba. Among all these soldiers, there were 7,000 selected troops who were left-handed, each of whom could sling a stone at a hare and not miss. Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 4,000 swordsmen, all of them fit for battle. The Israelites went up to Bethel and inquired of God. They said, "Who of us is to go up to fight against the Benjamites?" The Lord replied, "Judah should go first." The next morning, the Israelites got up and pitched camp near Geba. The Israelites went out to fight the Benjamites and took up battle positions against them at Geba. The Benjamites came out of Geba and cut down 22,000 Israelites on the battlefield that day. But the Israelites encouraged one another and again took up their positions where they had stationed themselves the first day. The Israelites went up and swept before the Lord until evening, and they inquired of the Lord. They said, "Shall we go up again to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites?" The Lord said, "Go up against them." Then the Israelites drew near to to Benjamin the second day. This time, when the Benjamites came out of Geba to oppose them, they cut down another 18,000 Israelites, all of them armed with swords. Then all the Israelites, the whole army, went up to Bethel, and there they sat weeping before the Lord. They fasted that day until evening and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings to the Lord. And the Israelites inquired of the Lord. In those days, the ark of the covenant of God was there, with Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, ministering before it. They asked, shall we go up again to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites, or not? The Lord responded, go, for tomorrow I will give them into your hands. Then Israel set an ambush around Geba. They went up against the Benjamites on the third day and took up positions against Geba, as they had done before. The Benjamites came out to meet them, and they were drawn away from the city. They began to inflict casualties on the Israelites as before, so that about 30,000 men fell in the open field and on the roads, the one leading to Bethel and the other to Geba. While the Benjamites were saying, we are defeated them as before, the Israelites were saying, let's retreat and draw them away from the city to the roads. Thank you, guys. All the men of Israel moved from their place and took up positions at Baal Tamar, and the Israelites ambushed charged out its place on the west of Geba. Then 10,000 of Israel's able young men made a frontal attack on Geba. The fighting was so heavy that the Benjamites did not realize how near disaster was. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel, and on that day the Israelites struck down 25,100 Benjamites, all armed with swords. Then the Benjamites saw that they were beaten. Now all the men of Israel had given way before Benjamin, because they realized on the ambush they had set near Geba. Those who had been in ambush made a sudden dash into Geba, spread out and put the whole city to the sword. The Israelites had arranged with the ambush that they should send up a great cloud of smoke from the city, and then the Israelites would counterattack. The Benjamites had begun to inflict casualties on the Israelites, about 30, and they said, we are defeated them as in the first battle. But when the column of the smoke began to rise from the city, the Benjamites turned and saw the whole city going up in smoke. Then the Israelites counterattacked, and the Benjamites were terrified because they realized that disaster had come on them. So they fled before the Israelites in the direction of the wilderness, but they could not escape the battle. And the Israelites who came out of the towns cut them down. They surrounded the Benjamites, chased them, and easily overran them in the vicinity of Geba on the east. 18,000 Benjamites fell, all of them valiant fighters. As they turned and fled towards the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, the Israelites cut down 5,000 men along the road. They kept pressing after the Benjamites as far as Gidom and struck down 2,000 more. On that day, 25,000 Benjamite swordsmen fell, all of them vigilant fighters. But 600 of them turned and fled into the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon, where they stayed for 4 months. Then the men of Israel went back to Benjamin and put all the town to the sword, including the animals and everything else they found. All the towns they came across they set on fire. So you can't outrun God's judgment, right? So they thought they could run into the wilderness and hide, but eventually God said, you will come to the sword. Hey Leighton, thank you for coming through. You will come to judgment and justice will be served. And only God can do that, right? So God made sure that they got what they deserved. They got basically justice, right? For the evil crime that they committed. Chapter 21. The men of Israel had taken an oath at Mizpah. Not one of us will give his daughter in marriage to a Benjamite. The people went to Bethel, where they sat before God until evening, raising their voices and weeping bitterly. Lord, God of Israel, they cried, why has this happened to Israel? Why should one tribe be missing from Israel today? Early the next day, the people built an altar and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Israelites asked, who from all the tribes of Israel has failed to assemble before the Lord? For they had taken a solemn oath that anyone who failed to assemble before the Lord at Mizpah was to be put to death. Now the Israelites grieved for the tribe of Benjamin, their fellow Israelites. Today one tribe is cut off from Israel. They said, how can we provide wives for those who are left, since we have taken an oath by the Lord not to give them any of our daughters in marriage? Then they asked, which one of the tribes of Israel failed to assemble before the Lord at Mizpah? They discovered that no one from Jabesh Gilead had come to the camp for the assembly. When they encountered the people, they found that none of the people of Jabesh Gilead were there. So the assembly sent 12,000 fighting men with instructions to go to Jabesh Gilead and put to the sword those living there, including the women and children. This is what you are to do, they said. Kill every male and every woman who's not a virgin. They found among the people in Jabesh Gilead among 400 young women who had never slept with a man, and they took them to camp at Shiloh in Canaan. Then the whole assembly sent an offer of peace to the Benjamites at the rock of Rimmon. So you see now how the rest of the Israelites now are still disobeying God. You see how they're still trying to make it an excuse, trying to make a way for the Benjamites. God is trying to purify the evil and get that out of the Israelites, but yet the Israelites are saying, they are part of the tribe. We're going against God at this point. We're part of the tribe, right? We need to still bring them in so that their legacy can still live on, even though God said, I have burned that city. I've basically got rid of the Benjamites, but somehow you Israelites still want to save them, right? And they're trying to find a way around it, like a clause around it, right? Even though they've made the oath, and God said, once you've made the oath, right, you can't go back on it. You've made the oath, you keep your oath. So I guess they're trying to find a way around the oath where they can still make sure that the Benjamites legacy still stays on, but their oath is still kept. But at this point, you're going against God. So I mean, you've broken your oath. So the Benjamites returned at that time and were given the women of Jabesh Gilead, who had been spared, but there were not enough for them all. The people grieved for Benjamin because the Lord had made a gap in the tribes of Israel, and the elders of the assembly said, with the women of Benjamin destroyed, how shall we provide wives for the men who are left? The Benjamite survivors must have heirs. They said, so that a tribe of Israel will not be wiped out. We can't give them our daughters as wives, since we Israelites have taken this oath. Cursed be anyone who gives a wife to a Benjamite. But look, there is the annual festival of the Lord in Shiloh, which lies north of Bethel, east of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem, and south of Lebonah. So they instructed the Benjamites, saying, "Go and hide in the vineyards and watch. When a young woman of Shiloh come up to join in the dancing, rush from the vineyards, and each of you sees one of them to be your wife. Then return to the land of Benjamin. When their fathers or brothers complain to us, we will say to them, 'Do us the favor of helping them, because we did not get wives for them during the war. You will not be guilty of breaking your oath, because you did not give your daughters to them.'" So that was what the Benjamites did. While the young women were dancing, each man caught one and carried her off to be his wife. Then they returned to their inheritance and rebuilt the towns and settled in them. At that time, the Israelites left that place and went home to their tribes and clans, and each to his own inheritance. And it ends with, "In those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit." So I just want to end this out by saying, God was not with them, right? When they were doing these wicked things and they turned away from him. They abandoned God. They did what they want, right? And a life without God guidance is chaotic. And we have seen from 17 to 21 how chaotic, how evil, how corrupt they had all got, even going against what God had done. The Benjamites finding a way to justify keeping an Israelite clan still going against God, even though God said justice has been done. This is justice. This is my justice, but you're going against my justice, right? It just highlights that we all need God's supplication and salvation, right? And we need his divine intervention, right? We saw that there was no control, and it got all so out of control, and it got so evil, right? God made sure that justice was done, right? And God can still see when evil is being done, right? And he will, in his time, will get justice. And as we see, he got justice, right? And even when they did cry out to God, and even when they were in the evil, God still helped them. God still showed them mercy. God still showed them compassion, even when they were doing fit in their own eyes and not in the eyes of the Lord. So I just want to highlight, what a wicked generation. Kind of something like today, right? Turning their backs on God and rejecting him as their heavenly father, right? Especially Michael, making idols and having other gods and shrines, and making it an ephod, which is disrespectful to God, right? And it just really shows in that time where people's loyalty, where people's heads was at, where people's evil and wickedness lied, and how corrupt that nation got. And it also shows how the Levite integrated himself with the world, right? He had the treasures of heaven, he had the treasures of the Lord, he had God, right? But he chose to choose the treasures of the world rather than walking with God, right? So it just really showed no value in God. It really showed that the Israelites didn't find God worthy enough to sit with his decision and his judgment. And overall, it just really showed the depths of evil that happened in the times of the judges, right? Because it started out in the judges being the judges taking the Israelites out of oppression. And as we got closer to the end of the judges, we saw that those judges themselves were becoming a big problem, leading the Israelites down to destruction. We could start to see it breaking apart as to why we get now into 17 chapters 21. We just see the whole chaoticness of the Israelites. That's okay, sweet. You're welcome. So, I'm just gonna leave it there and sit with you because that was really heavy. As I said, when I read it, it was really heavy for me to read because it was it's a such dark time, and it's a such an evil time and a corrupt time, right? But then again, I relate it back to the times that we live in now. How much more different is it then now to then, right? How much more mercy can God show us, right? And He shows us that every day. So that is the end of Judges. So I just want to say you should all give yourselves a clap for getting to the end of Judges with me and staying through the Judges, because I know the Old Testament is a lot, and there's a lot of history, and there's a lot of laws, and there's a lot of everything in the Old Testament. So, thank you guys for actually staying around and listening um while we go through the Old Testament, right? So well done, guys. Give yourself a clap. You have done amazing, amazing, amazing. And it just shows your faithfulness in sticking through and hearing the word, hearing the word. So thank you, thank you, thank you. As I said, I am learning, guys, and thank you for coming along and learning with me. This has been a wonderful experience, and I'm going to keep learning as I be reading through the Bible. So before we go into the book of Ruth, I'm going to do an introduction to Rahab. So now we're going to move slightly into the women in the Bible, right? We're going to talk about the women in the Bible. So we're going to be talking about Rahab, and then we're going to move on to Ruth, and then I think after Ruth, I'll be going into the book of John, which is the Gospels, and then we'll go back into Samuel's, because I just want us to have an understanding of Jesus, and a bigger understanding of how it ties in with the Old Testament, right? So, and the book of John is actually so great because it describes Jesus in such a beautiful, vivid way. So, that's why I've done it like that. So, we have got quite a few next chapters, exciting chapters to go through. So, thank you again for all listening, and I will see you tomorrow because I will be doing a devotional, and then we'll be back Tuesday. So thank you again for all that stick around, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.